All right. Team, how we feeling? Energy's been awesome. Questions have been great. A lot of thumbs up. Arenda's in the house. I love that. Excited for the panel today. Wanted to welcome everybody, not only for joining us, but also to bring everyone up to speed that we have a bunch of operators that have built some of the most impressive companies in the SaaS startup space over the last few years, but also have brought a new chapter to what they're doing. And this panel is also a part of the 20Sales Fund, which is a venture fund focused on B2B SaaS and early stage investing. And so with that, I'm excited to welcome Jess, Renu, Lauren, and Kelly. And so Jess, maybe we start with you and would love just introductions of who are you, what do you do, and tell us a little bit about some of the career chapters you've been a part of coming into this.
Hi, Jessica Arnold. I'm currently the VP of Sales Development at Amplitude. I've been there about a year. Before that, I was at Dropbox for 6.5 years, and prior to that, I was at Salesforce. So mostly B2B SaaS companies and top of funnel, sales development, inside sales, that type of role. Renu?
Awesome. Let's see if this works. Okay. Renu Gupta. I lead all of revenue over at a climate technology company by the name of Pachama. We're on a mission to restore nature by restoring nature to solve for the climate crisis. Prior to that, I was at a mental well-being company called Thrive Global. I've also been at Slack with Kelly Bray here, Dropbox with Jess and Sam, and so and a couple of folks in the audience who worked together as well. Prior to that, I was at Google and a couple other startups in the Valley.
Hi, my name is Lauren Schwartz. I am currently the VP of Enterprise Sales at Fivetran. Before I've been there for almost 4 years now. Before that, I was at Segment, now Twilio, where I also led the enterprise team out here in the West. Before that, I was getting an MBA at Stanford, and before that, I grew up at Google. Spent many years at Google in enterprise sales, and also expecting my second child in a week. So here we are. Thanks for having me.
Not the next hour. Hi, I'm Kelly Bray. I currently am the VP of Account Management and Product-Led Success at MongoDB. Prior to Mongo, I was at Slack for about 6.5 years. Joined as we started our go-to-market functions. We were called accounts back in the day, evolved that into sales, into customer success, where I spent the majority of my tenure there, leading teams across renewals and your classic CSM functions, and then a lot of focus on digital and scale CS. Prior to Slack, I spent about 5 years at Box, also leading both pre-sales and post-sales functions. So a bit of a mix, but leading mostly teams that span the customer journey. So really thinking about how do those experiences connect and provide the best possible customer overall experience.
Some amazing chapters that I'm excited for us to draw on your experience on. And I think the focus of this session is going to be a bit more tactical. The goal is around, as we're making that transition as a company, selling into the SMB and mid-market, how do you make that march as not only a revenue team, but as a company as a whole towards the enterprise? Now, I personally am a big fan of making sure that we all have common language and common definition. And there are a couple words out there, some jargon perhaps, that gets tossed around where everyone has a very different set of meanings and definitions for it. And I think one of those words is enterprise. I don't know, maybe some nodding heads around the room. Maybe we've been a part of a conversation where it's very clear we're using the same term, but everyone is approaching that from a very different lens. And so would love to hear from this group, how do you think about enterprise, how do you define it? And if you're willing to share a story or two around finding that common definition with your teams, we'll start there. Lauren, you want to start off?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think we've all been in the situation where one day the CEO of your company, not current company, just a theoretical company, says, we're going after the enterprise. And everyone's like, yeah. And then 6 months happen and they're like, well, this is hard. We're going after commercial, actually, and then it's renamed corporate and it's SMB and it's growth and it's all the different names. And then you talk to your friends who are investing and they use the word enterprise to mean anything that's B2B versus something that's customer facing, consumer. And so I take it very personally because enterprise has been my bread and butter for my entire career. And you can cut it by employee count. You can cut it by revenue. You can cut it by whatever is relevant to your business. To me, it comes down to what does the sales motion look like and how are decisions made and what are the requirements of a business like an enterprise, which has multifaceted, multi-regional needs from a security perspective, from a user perspective, from a sophistication of just purchasing pattern perspective. And so for me, I find myself being the evangelist of selling to big kids at every company that I go to. And it's fun because a lot of times, and Fivetran actually is a great example. Fivetran's been really successful historically in the data infrastructure space in the SMB commercial motion. Makes sense, early adopters, all of that. We actually have a product that is perfect for enterprise. We just didn't know how to talk to enterprise companies and how to navigate multi-thread, et cetera. So that's been a lot of the work that I've done in the last 4 years, is helping build that motion around, hey, we need a deal desk function, or hey, procurement's a thing. It's not just the same decision maker and signer. And it's a really fun process to build because you learn how to navigate different buyer personalities and needs, and never to rely on one set of information, but to really build up a case and help these big companies get organized internally. And sometimes it's the internal selling that's much harder than the external selling.
For sure. Kelly, any thoughts on the post-sale side of things and how that march maybe leads to different understandings of the definition?
Yeah. It's similar post-sales in terms of, to me, enterprise, you can draw the line at all different numbers, but it's really about the complexity. So that's both the product and the technical complexity, but also the change management, how does a large organization roll out a new software? And that has a whole different level of steps and complexity and planning required to be successful. And then ongoing, it's the same multi-threading. It's the same consideration for users, admins, executives, decision makers. You need to be managing at every level. And that is quite a different motion and skill set than someone who is working one-on-one with the core user of their product day to day.
Renu, you've made a career out of leading the charge on a lot of motions, particularly Dropbox and Slack. There's a joke between Renu and I because I was early on the enterprise team, air quotes, at Dropbox, and I sold one of the crappiest deals of all time that Renu had to inherit once she joined. She's like, who signed those terms of service?
It was a very fun inheritance, I promise. Yeah, but there was a lot to fix there.
But surprise level's low. But curious your read on not only the voice of the customer and bringing that back to your teams, but what have been some of the challenges operationally when you think about making that step?
I think that the word enterprise probably to everybody in this room is an exciting word, but for some companies it's actually a taboo. And so I think the first thing is really understanding, where does your company want to go, right? I mean, we've seen at some of the companies we worked at, no names mentioned, but they're consumer heavy, and then they realize, okay, there's many folks within organizations swiping their credit cards, paying large amounts to our organization for using the same software. How do we get them on an enterprise-wide agreement? And in order to do that, you have to make sure that we have certain security policies in place, administrative functionality. We were at Slack when we took IBM, from 4,000 licenses to 400,000 licenses, and
Playing a different game then.
Yeah, it was Kelly and my team worked really closely together on that with product, and it was a big rollout, and it required a lot of different folks to be bought in, CEO board down, because we had to build certain functionalities like enterprise key management that IBM said, we absolutely will not do this unless you guys have certain features. And so you have to, it is a team sport, as we know sales is, but really to be on the enterprise journey, you have to have buy-in from different functions. And it's not just about revenue and total addressable market, but it's where do you see the product journey going with the company? And we've seen that go in different directions from the places I've worked.
Absolutely. And the front lines are going to be those early conversations. And Jess, you've been building out sales development teams. You've got BDRs that are going and having that early, not only advocacy, but feedback loop. And so what's worked for you in terms of bringing that back in, and not only for your revenue teams, but the cross-functional team? How do you think about that?
Yeah, similarly to what my colleagues have already talked about, I think for going to the enterprise for sales dev, it's a completely different motion than the high velocity of the corporate and mid-market, where you're looking to just basically set meetings, toss it over the fence to the AE and bounce out of there. It actually has to be much more research-based. You have to bring relevancy to multi-threads of an organization, and that takes a higher skill set than just somebody mass blasting emails and hoping somebody responds. So I think having to go through that talent transformation or targeting a different skill set in terms of hiring, where you're looking for people that maybe have been in iBanking that want to move into tech, or maybe they were in real estate or former lawyers, those types of was what you're trying to target, because you want somebody that has some sort of context of what enterprise looks like and critical thought. I know it's crazy, but people willing to have critical thought when they go after these enterprise organizations.
So as we're going through and talking about this journey, there's the talent and people side of things, there's the process side of things, and ultimately there's technology as well. But I want to start with people. And I think something that I've observed in my career is you've got a SMB or more transactional motion. You want to take that step, but you don't necessarily have the right folks or the right skill sets internally. And so curious for each of you how you've thought about reshaping talent on your team. Whoever would like to
Yeah,
jump in.
we're going through this right now. 6 months ago, going after the enterprise, super exciting. And so having to go through that talent shift and identifying the people that are willing and excited. I think in the earlier session today, talking about the CEO and the kind of like C-level leadership of painting the vision of we're really going to all win together, but we can only win together if we're all willing to kind of step up out of our comfort zone and learn more. And so identifying quickly who are the people that we think are willing to do that and go on and be a little uncomfortable versus who are the people that are just want to rinse and repeat and not really lean into that critical thought component. But I think you have to make those decisions swiftly. That was also something that was covered I thought was helpful, and be clear about where we're going. And if you're not interested, then maybe it's not the journey for you.
We have something that we call, so everybody knows ideal customer profile. We actually have internally when we hire ideal candidate profile, because as you guys know, what your company looks like right now is probably going to look completely different in 2024. I know some of the folks in the audience here that are on these rocket ship type of companies where they're growing very quickly, and probably what you hired for 12 months ago is a different type of enterprise AE as you're looking for today. Maybe you're moving up market, and so you need someone that's got more of a consultative background to sell, or they know how to build relationships, or they know how to have the tough conversations. They also know how to, make sure internally they have right conversations for the right enterprise agreements, right? I mean, I remember at Dropbox that was a big stepping stone to make sure that we had the right MSA in place for customers that were looking to spend, a certain dollar amount, and it takes a certain type of AE to think that, okay, 10 steps ahead. Like if we're going to do this 400,000 user seat deal at IBM, what do we need internally? And so, all of it is learnable, but I will say that, as a revenue leader, you have to start thinking about where you need to up or change the skill set for who you're hiring for too.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. You've heard a bit about hiring and hiring profiles. Outside of hiring, just thinking of who you already have on the bus and how you get folks aligned internally. I think we spend a lot of time, especially on revenue teams, saying, oh, we need sales enablement, we need sales training, we need sales this. It's actually company enablement, company alignment, company training. And one thing that I found to be very effective is making everyone be co-authors of this adventure that they're going on together, meaning we sit down with product, we sit down with engineering, we sit down with PM, with marketing, and we say, here is the language we're going to use. This is what enterprise means to us. This is what the buying cycle looks like. Even if you're in product or engineering, like you need to know that this is the experience that our prospective customers are going to go through. So for example, we went through and defined everyone at Fivetran knows what the word economic buyer means. And you might think that that's only for sales teams, but it's not, because you need to be able to resonate with someone who has access to discretionary funding and can make the call and can also stop the call. Everyone knows what a champion is. Everyone knows what champion development is. And for those in the room who don't know, champion has to meet 3 criteria. One is that their success is aligned to your success. 2 is that they have power and influence within the company. And 3 is that they're willing and able to sell on your behalf. And so everyone at Fivetran needs to know that, even if they're outside of selling. And it's just one very small example of how to think about how to leverage the resources you already have internally to get alignment so that when we say, hey, engineering, can you build this thing just for this one customer? It's not scalable. You can easily speak the same language about why and where the value is going to come from and how it's going to become a repeatable motion. And I think that's the key. Is a lot of us who've grown up in enterprise, sometimes we think we're special snowflakes. Certainly the enterprise customers think that they're special snowflakes. And the reality is the only way to scale a business and enterprise is to build a repeatable motion, and it requires the same language cross-functionally, not just on the sales team.
One more, maybe less obvious one is comp plan and incentives. That's a pretty significant shift as you move into the enterprise cycles. And that I saw that it was moving slower than the business at 2 different companies that I've been at during this transition. And that's going to be a big point of friction if you can't get the comp plan and incentive right.
I would love to add customer success post-sales, probably going to be very important to you too as you move to enterprise, because a consumer company, the retention is probably is not as great, but then you also have like the inbound there as well. Enterprise is very important for net retention, so you have to think about what does it mean to make these customers successful. How do you keep them for customers for life, whether that's 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever years. So.
Sign a 3-year deal, we'll have a better chance at it.
Absolutely.
Well, to that point, I mean, we're talking about it from a talent and enablement perspective, but the customer profile actually shifts as you go and land these deals. What have you seen in terms of challenges with the team or intentions that you've had to have in terms of taking on a whole different beast, if you will, of customer size and complexity?
Yeah, I think a couple different things change. One would be what's your partner or professional services relationship. That dynamic can become much more complex and the account teams become much larger. And so how your organization facilitates that collaboration and communication will dramatically change that customer's onboarding and their experience. If you're tightly aligned and connected and working hand in hand, you're going to have a faster time to go live or value or whatever your milestone is there. I think the nature of working a bunch of different work streams during a customer onboarding is also going to feel quite different than I have my 2 people I work with in a smaller company and we're really committed to this project and we're going to move really fast, versus I have a technical work stream and I have a change management work stream and I have a comms work stream and I have all these different people involved. And that's just a level of project management that's significantly bigger than some of your team may have experienced before. And then ongoing relationships. We've got to be thinking about broad user adoption, admin enablement, and best practices, product knowledge and awareness there, and building champions within your admins. But then also, who are your business stakeholders? Who's your economic buyer? Who are the other players? And how are you engaging all of them in different ways at the same time? So it's a much more matrix approach than just, I have my one person, I'm going to teach them how to press the right buttons in the product.
Super helpful. On the pre-sales side, I think when I think about the talent and up-leveling, if you've got people that are, we'll call it mid-career or have different experience levels, there are always going to be folks that have that up-and-comer profile that you can lean into, right? They can get there. I think it's more challenging in entry-level roles where, hey, we're going after the enterprise, but it doesn't mean we're suddenly able to change the profile of our sales development reps. And so, Jess, just curious with the journey you're on at Amplitude, how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, it's always a journey in sales dev, if any of you are familiar. But I will tell you, kind of similar to what Lauren was saying, now that we're going after the enterprise, we've had to change our ideal customer profile and who those buyers are. Initially, we were going after, in smaller organizations, just much more single-threaded, and now figuring out how having to talk to the C-suite and in a completely different business unit, understanding that different use case. And so having to be incredibly prescriptive around making sure that they understand how to hold a conversation with maybe a safer conversation. So maybe an IC or somebody that's using the product already, but then using that information to leverage, again, relevancy amongst the C-level VP plus. And if they're not comfortable doing that, being comfortable leaning on to the account executive of prepping them of what is actually going to go on in that conversation, whether it's a discovery call or if it's just gathering for a multi-threaded deal cycle. In terms of actual enablement, how many hours do you have? It generally takes, I think, 17 times to tell an SDR to do something before they actually do it. So recording meetings is key, and making sure that they are actively being participants in terms of just like practicing. I wasn't here for Joe Montana, but I would assume some of his message was around practice. And that's the life of an SDR, is making sure that they're getting at-bats, whether it be with their AE, whether it be with internal teams, and making sure that the leadership team of sales dev is with the first line manager of the sales team, so that they're all talking that same language of who is the person, where are we winning, what's actually causing deals to move down the line, I think is incredibly important.
A lot of shade thrown at the SDR function.
Well, it's out of love. I love them, guys. They're my heart and soul.
So Jess and I met as SDRs in 2010 at Salesforce, and so it actually resonates deeply. The density.
We both met our spouses on the SDR floor. So the ultimate prospect.
Just a bunch of
Not each other. Not each other.
Just a bunch of sketch balls out there. Yes.
I am a big pro phone person. So we were just on another meeting earlier where there was like a very provocative statement around certain things being dead. I don't think the phone is dead. I think it's a tool in the toolbox, but you have to differentiate. And that's actually something they'll laugh because I love Gen Z. I think they're fascinating. I could just sit and talk to them all day and just learn all their secrets. But one thing that I think they do really well is they think creatively about getting people's attention. And so they've taught me a lot around maybe the phone works, maybe an email works, maybe like an Alice gift betting on a sports game works, maybe a video through LinkedIn works, but there's not one silver bullet. And so having to constantly practice and think critically about who you're trying to get a hold of and like what might resonate with that person based on the information you can find on the internet. Pro phone.
Pro phone.
So I don't know who your buyer is. If your buyer is a CIO, they are very used to signing 3-year deals. So just sell the 3-year deal. To Kelly's point, it'll buy your team time to make sure they're successful. It'll save your team's time from not having to sell the value over and over and over again in like smaller increments where they'll see smaller returns. For me, having been a part of a couple of Series B companies as well, the multi-year deal is so important as we're like building the plane as we're flying it to make sure that what we're selling we actually can deliver. And so I would say, I think in this arena, people are used to buying multi-year deals do the selling of like, you get the discount, blah, 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 whatever they get with it. But I think it's just a safer place. And hopefully your buyer gets it as well. It makes sense. And I will say, I don't know if I have a good answer for this. I'm curious to hear the other perspective because we definitely have had customers who they signed earlier on, and then as they grew, they got a better deal, right? Because they locked into a certain type of pricing. So you had a good.
I wouldn't worry about it. I think you have bigger fish to fry, frankly, moving up market and just being worried that in the future you're going to leave a little bit of money on the table from your early adopters. Like that's what they get because they signed up early. And I'd just say there's so many different ways you can construct agreements where they step up, for example, or whether there's an option to expand across different SKUs. Or one thing we're doing at Fivetran right now is really leaning into getting co-marketing rights. And in sales, sometimes you're like, oh, you want me to take out the thing about we're going to use your logo? That's fine, just sign. But the value that logo rights gets you is worth a lot of money in terms of whether or not they're a customer forever, you get that street cred because you're working with IBM. And so that does help you move up market and allow companies to make an investment in an up-and-comer who's best in breed but new because they're seeing other iconic inspirational companies doing the same.
I will say I was talking about the deal that Sam sold that I had to clean up, just so you guys know.
Got bigger fish to fry. We got bigger fish to fry. You're going to say something, Kelly.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, if you give them a great deal, then you can also ask for a lot of partnership on that journey, feedback, and really being almost like your enterprise design partner as you move in that space. So I would agree. I wouldn't worry too much about the price protection, and more so, can you get a great enterprise partner on that journey?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were raising your hand.
Just controlling the video. We're good. Before we move on, last thing on the talent side, and Lauren, you promised strong conviction on a few things, and one you're delivering. I'm appreciating that. I noticed that you had a very, very strong grasp on champion definition, which makes me think that you're deeply rooted on sales methodology as a group. And a decision, especially as we're all entering into our planning processes or mid-cycle for next year, many companies facing, is it the time to bring that kind of structure with a set methodology and common language? And so curious across the group of when you've seen that inflection point or that decision feel right.
I negotiated it when I took the offer that the company was going to invest in methodology and one single language that we all were going to come together that I already explained. For those who are familiar with force management command of the message, that's where that champion development definition came from. But there are a million different companies that do this, and all that matters is that you keep using it. It actually doesn't matter which one you use, that you're consistent and that you're using it across different teams so that there's no question about whether we have a real deal here or whether we're bending over backwards, investing proof of concept, proof of value resources for nothing. So as a sales leader, I'm not going to join a company that's not going to invest in cross-company, cross-functional enablement and shared language that allows us to be productive as a team, regardless of the stage.
Yeah, I agree on the consistency. I saw 2 false starts with Sandler at prior companies, and then Mongo is dedicated also to command of the message, has been since long before I was there, but we're actually going through and retraining everyone now, including everyone in customer success, so that, to your point, everyone has the common language. So it's not just a one-time effort. Like, this is a repeat training over many years for the entire go-to-market organization. And the rest of the company is familiar with it, but we're doing like a full in-person investment enablement effort over the next quarter for everyone again. So I think it's the consistency. I think that's the biggest part.
Yet lest you think that we are getting kickbacks from force management, we are not. Not
yet.
The pitch is anything as long as it's consistent and enables you to build a repeatable motion.
The thing I'd add is it needs to be mirrored in systems. So like as you move through the stage process, that language needs to be, whether it's in fields or even if it's just in your forecast call, if your CRO or VP is not speaking in that language when they're asking why it's in commit or a best case, like to me, that you're missing the mark.
And the easiest way to do that is to make sure in Salesforce you stage gate. So you cannot move to the next stage without filling out certain fields.
We're going to shift our topic a bit to the next phase, if you will. And if y'all haven't noticed out there, things have shifted a bit in the last 18 months. And the word efficiency/productivity seems to be at the heart of every conversation. And so curious with this group, how you're navigating that and what you've been putting in place with your teams to drive greater efficiency.
I'll go first. SDR, when they're doing budget cuts, we're normally first up. But in all seriousness, I think with AI now coming to the market, I think there's a combination of like an outreach Salesforce AI ? Tool and like how do you actually make going outbound efficient? And I think with sales dev, you always are going to rub against, are you getting enough from what you're spending on an SDR? And some of that is supposed to be an ROI of pipeline generation, but the other part is supposed to be an ROI of human talent and being able to work people throughout your organization. In terms of efficiency, that I currently, or when I was first hired, was under the strategy and ops org, first time, been marketing, been sales, never been in strategy and ops. I know there's a couple of you in here. Different world, different love language of G sheets. But learning how to actually quantify that percentage of increase of productivity quarter over quarter, like having that rigor. I don't know if you guys have that in the sales orgs. I'm now in the sales org. We do not have that in our sales org. So being able to, but actually quantify it and measure and have to report back out has made me much more fluent in not just KPIs, but actually understanding what works. So I think it's easy to say, hey, go make 100 calls, but if it's not setting up meetings or it's not moving the needle anywhere, then what's the point? I care less about telling you how many activities you need to do. I care more about who's doing enough to move things forward and then learning about what that person's doing and scaling that.
We spent some time talking about this over dinner. The move to efficiency makes me giggle a little bit because it's not a surprise to anyone. We just sort of were living, closing our eyes and pretending that it didn't matter that we were growth at all costs for the last several years in this industry. It's what is always a challenge for me to wrap my head around is the obsession over sales productivity as a standalone metric versus company productivity. I'm like, what about all these people who are on salary? What are they doing? You know, but it's a real metric.
Yeah.
Preach, Lauren. Preach.
Rule of 40, sales productivity, all these things that we're trying to get this like perfect number. It's like all down to the revenue teams. And it can be frustrating as a revenue leader sometimes because you think about, there are several strong opinions in the market about what roles are needed to support the enterprise business. So some, like Snowflake leadership, would suggest that you actually don't need a success team or a CSM.
Disagree.
That was a layup. And then there are others who are investing in account managers to do the commercials upon renewal and customer success to accelerate onboarding. I work in a consumption business similar to Snowflake. The consumption business brings its own level of efficiency challenges because there is no end to the sales cycle. There's no tossing the customer over the fence. You're never done selling because we don't even recognize revenue until it's consumed, no matter how much someone commits to. So then the sellers get, everyone's iterating on their comp plans. Well, how can we tie the seller's variable compensation to the success of the company? I know we won't pay them up front. We'll pay them as the customer uses so that they're aligned. But then it all falls on the seller versus like a broad, more cross-functional pod motion where everyone, revenue or otherwise, salaried or on variable, comes together to make their customers successful. So to me, the holy grail of hitting these efficiency metrics is not about just honing in so aggressively on sales productivity, but rather looking for the patterns, figuring out how our fastest growing enterprise customers are growing, what resources are needed, and being a little bit flexible and fluid about it so that you can apply the resources you have today rather than over-indexing on getting to a specific decimal.
+1 on CS needs to be there. But yes, I'm also in a consumption business, so it's an interesting conversation. But I think on the CS side, a little bit of a different angle is the whole digital CS, scale CS is like the hot topic right now. But I think it's always talked about from the perspective of efficiency. And there's a whole different side of this, which is customers don't always want to talk to you on the phone. Like they don't need to schedule a call with you to get some basic direction on how to unblock something within your product. So thinking about it more from the perspective of what is a modern customer experience and how do you build all the different methods for which that customer can interact with your company. So of course there's people, but those should be your most consultative interactions, the most tailored, the most nuanced. And then the kind of what I call copy paste work, where you send this email out to a team and you're like, make sure all your customers know about this. And they're copying it and pasting it in another email. Like we should just not be doing that anymore. We should have different ways to get that information to customers. Email is very overwhelming for a lot of people. Let's think about portals, webinars, communities. Like there's so many different methods. So I think efficiency is obviously very critical, but I think there's also an angle of how do we better serve customers in the way that they want to work with us, which is also more efficient. So it's really a win-win evolution in CS, I think.
Alex anchored us at the beginning around team sizes, constraints, resources, and a lot of the pressure that we're feeling is this is the squad, this is the resourcing. How are we going to How are we going to do more with less, so to speak, or do more with the same? Curious as we think about this through teams, and my mind goes towards swim lanes and ownership areas. Just curious if that's been a part of the discussion as you're going through planning, and if there's been a makeshift in who owns what along that customer journey.
We made a big change this year. We introduced account management and renewals as new functions. As we have evolved into a consumption model, and we're rethinking, who are our highest growth potential customers, who are our mature customers who are incredibly valuable to us but have a different set of needs, and then what's our acquisition new customer strategy. So we reorganized our whole go-to-market team this year, and we'll continue to do so next year along those different pillars.
Go ahead. We also reoriented our team. So we are Series B, so we're a little bit smaller, and our sales team is small but mighty as well. So we're doing new logo acquisition and expansion because we want to make sure what we found is in our business, and climate technology is a little bit different from what you guys probably are doing, but we found that once we have a customer, they really do come back to us over and over and over again because they trust us with the projects that we're delivering for them. And so we want to make sure they continue to come to us and we get the feedback on what we want to invest in further. But for new logos, it's taking us a little bit longer. So we're trying to figure out what happens in that mid part of the funnel to really accelerate the sales cycle. And I've only been at Pachama for 7 months. We made the switch probably 5 months ago, and we're really seeing dividends for that. So it's been great.
I think the only constant we experience in sales is reorgs. So we are also going through thinking through how we want to structure things, especially we just a year ago did switch to a consumption compensation plan. The business has been on consumption for a long time, but it's really interesting to think, like, at the end of the year, we're like, oh, okay, we messed this up, and we messed that up. Maybe we'll make hunter-farmer teams and that'll solve it. Or maybe we should verticalize. Should we verticalize here? Or maybe we'll just do marketing verticalization, but then everyone else is a generalist. Like, we've all tried all of these different ways to slice, and the ultimate goal that's shared across all of these attempts is focus. And that's the thing that's so hard when you don't have an account management team or a CS team, because like my AEs right now are all focused on driving their own pipeline, driving new logo acquisition, driving consumption, also doing renewals, also expanding existing customers, et cetera, et cetera. And that can be, it leads to a jack of all trades type of situation where you're good at nothing. And so, but just being open and honest about it, we probably will next year try to have some groups of sellers really focused on new logos, more greenfield, and some with fewer customers who are really focused on driving consumption. And this is how the best consumption businesses get their big enterprise customers to grow, because you have someone who is who's walking the halls, as we used to say before everything was so virtual, of the customers' offices, and, badged at Morgan Stanley. We have someone on our team who, that's the kind of level of being stuck into your customer and their day-to-day that will enable you to make these enterprise customers as valuable as the promise was when you were thinking about moving up market. And so focus to me is the North Star, whether you slice it by vertical, by company size, by new logo or existing business, and again, getting the right team behind them to grow.
We now have multiple roles. You're operating full-time, but you're also starting to take a look at a lot of the new technologies that are out there in the market. And just curious if you could share with the group what's exciting on the revenue tech side that you're seeing, and if there's anything that you've been looking at and implementing at your team that has been effective.
We just got such a contentious VC meeting yesterday, and it's going to change our whole strategy, I tell you. But it's been really interesting because, we actually get, so one of our big values to our portfolio companies is with 20Sales, you get us 4 plus 4 more go-to-market operators. And so for the seed companies that are looking to really understand how to go to market with their product, they can, we have Slack channels with them. They're asking us questions all day about, when to hire my first sales rep, how do I hire them? How do I build out the ICPs and the buyer personas? And so it's really fun work for us, things that we're doing all day. But we also get introduced to a lot of companies that are building AI for, how to use artificial intelligence to build out your ICPs and your buyer personas. And I think what we're seeing, one of the big trends, we were talking about this earlier, is we're seeing a lot of AI wrapper companies, like where they're just features that, many of us probably use Gong or, of course, probably Salesforce or HubSpot. A lot of these bigger companies are building these AI functionalities into their overall solution, but a lot of these smaller little startups are trying to pitch like features that will probably get built in. So there's a big, the software proliferation is real, and I think that we're going to see even further with AI, and just be wary of that. And obviously, as investors, we are as well.
In terms of investing in, it's fun because whenever we see sales tech, we're like, yeah, everyone must want that. I want that. I need it. And so thinking about expanding the TAM outside of your own personal needs can be a challenge when you're an operator in go-to-market and also investing. But for me, it's anything that can drive more focus. I'm just going to be a broken record on that, and more efficiency. And I mean, you mentioned call recording for SDR training and enablement. I've never worked at a call recording company, but I think that there's so much value in, for example, our pricing model, which we don't have time to talk about today probably, but can be challenging in a consumption market because it's sometimes hard to explain to buyers how pricing will work because there's economies of scale and a logarithmic curve, et cetera. I won't get into it, but the point is we listen to calls of sellers desperately attempting to communicate our pricing model to potential customers and just failing. And it really helps because our CEO has such strong conviction about the way that our pricing works. And we're like, okay, listen to this conversation. What would you have said there? And so anything that, again, can help you focus. People volunteer it. No one's embarrassed that they totally tripped in front of a customer because we just want to get better. We want better focus, more efficiency, and tools that can enable that are critical.
I think the space I'm most excited about is solutions to the dreaded handover, the loss of customer information. And then the same is true when you're eventually moving your AE patches, your CSM territories, and that loss of customer information, and then that horrible customer experience of, tell me what you're doing with the product. And that's like the most cringeworthy conversation, because we should have better tools. Like, we should be able to not only effectively capture everything a customer has ever told us and spent time telling us, but we should be able to put that in a format that can then easily transfer any team, any individual. And I think AI opens up a really exciting opportunity there around call recordings, around scraping all of the product data, plus the Salesforce data and notes and all the places, all those Google slides that have never seen the light of day after that great meeting, where there's gold in there, but those get lost. So that's such an exciting opportunity to, one, better understand our customers, but then two, create these really tailored, personalized experiences so that the next phone call is surprisingly informed. Like, that question about what are you doing should never happen again. And it should be every call is incremental value to the customer. So I haven't seen that exact thing yet, but that's what I'm excited about, hopefully getting to.
Awesome. Team, I wanted to open it up for Q&A. We had one question in the back.
I can speak to the evolution at Slack. We started with a single function that then broke into AEs and CSMs. And I think one of the things that was most powerful was those organizations were always peers. And those teams were partners in a single customer journey. So that starts with a leadership, a top-down sentiment. There has to be true belief that both of those teams are valuable and have a unique value to add to the business. And so I think when you set that tone, that waterfalls into, for example, shared spaces. How do you communicate about customers? Is that always in a shared space? Like for Slack, it was in Slack, of course, but does CS share back with sales, and does sales share back with CS? And is there a joint account planning exercise that takes place? Because what won't work in an enterprise customer is showing up with separate agendas, uninformed about what the other team is doing. And so in many cases, the enterprise selling journey is many, many years, lots of land and expand over time. So that conversation has to be all the time. And it has to be from a point of partnership, I think is like the other most important thing in that journey. And then clarity on who is responsible for what. Because what isn't a super efficient model is let's both do everything. So that's something that I think is a delicate dance between collaboration and just completely duplicative effort. So finding that guidance for your teams.
I would also say being upfront with the customer of what success looks like. So if you set the right, like here in 12 months, here's what we're going to prove to you by using our solution, and then keep on checking in to make sure that you're hitting those marks. And if you're not, be transparent about it. So there's no, we had at Slack, red account status channel, brings back PTSD.
It's an important process, Renu. We have to have it.
But, we never wanted our accounts to go into that channel because it was, the next level of scrutiny and also next level of meetings. But you want to make sure that you're starting to rank your customers as well, right? To understand, like, okay, they're on a 12-month contract. At, month 6, they're looking green. Month 9, they're looking yellow. What's going on? What are we not hitting? What are we not, what is the risk here? And then addressing it right away. So you're not like month 11 and a half. Okay, here's the order form. Wait, did we hit your metrics? So just really being upfront and checking in.
And that requires the customer to be clear about what they're trying to accomplish. Sometimes you find yourself trying to have these conversations and the customer maybe didn't staff appropriately to get the most out of their investment with you. And that can be very challenging. Then you're like, no, but we did all the things. And they're like, who said those were the things? And so it's just, when I'm reviewing a renewal with my team, I'm thinking about, okay, who at the customer said that this is why they invested in our software? Who else validated that? Was it just a random user who said that? And then, did we get the economic buyer to validate why they made the investment? And that needs to happen right away, not wait until the renewal. And then we do these, quarterly or whatever cadence reviews with decision makers so that when you get to the point that Renu just described, there are no surprises for anyone. And sometimes you have to resell and resell again throughout the year because there was a riff and the person who bought your product is no longer there, or the needs of the business changed, and that always happens. So it's our responsibility as the vendor to hold our customers accountable for investing their time and their staff. Part of your question was about aligning the internal teams, so sales and renewals. And so if you have the luxury of having people with specialized roles, I envy you. We don't always have that luxury. Sometimes we have an AE who's responsible for the full cycle. And what I would say there is whether you have a single role or you've split it into two, the incentive alignment is critical from a compensation plan in particular, since a lot of these roles are on variable consumption or variable comp. For example, I was once in a company where the renewals team was just compensated on logo retention, but not price, not discount, not anything, just logo retention.
It's a lucky plan.
Right. And so that's cool, except for then the salesperson is like, no, please do not offer them that discount. That would be a terrible precedent to set. I'll never make any money again. Right. And so you having something where number one, you're aligning the customer outcomes with the business outcomes. Then number two, to support that, you have incentive structure in place such that everyone is marching towards the same thing. And you're not like going on mute on the customer call being like, no, why did you offer that? Having this kind of thing.
Yeah, multi-year incentive is another example of if you have a renewal team that's separate from your AE team. So if you're comfortable giving up a couple points of discount for a 3-year deal, you got to make sure that isn't in conflict with the AE plan, for example.
I would say definitely MSA. So you're in the beginning, you're probably gonna have to use their paper more often than you or your legal counsel wants to, but it's comes with the territory. I would also say start thinking about pricing structures. So when do you offer volume discounts? Because I'm not sure what your pricing structure is now. Maybe you have one cost for per user, per year. But as you start moving up market and it becomes 250 users and then 1,000 and then 10,000, whatever else, they are going to want discounts and they're going to want different features as associated with, moving up market as well. So you kind of need like this tactical strategy of, making sure the order form is consistent with the language and where they get post-sale and who's going to be responsible for making sure they're onboarded and who's going to be, it's like in Salesforce, like the salesperson has to put in who gets access to the portal or the software, who's the admin, like little things like that, but also just making sure that you're setting them up for success and then thinking about in 12 months when they're up for renewal or 36 months and they've grown, 500 users, what does that look like? So you don't want to set the volumes the discounts too high so that you don't have room to grow because hopefully they'll grow with you. We did this great thing at Slack. I don't know if this went over to the customer success team, but another one of our general partners, actually both of them, Kim Graves and Maggie Hott, we worked on this thing called an AE skills matrix because this is a very common question at Slack of how do I get to becoming a mid-market AE to an enterprise AE to large enterprise? And so a couple of the functional leaders, I was the one for large enterprise, Kim and Maggie were enterprise and mid-market. We sat down together and we talked about what skills are necessary. And we had it bucketed into functional areas like building a playbook or following the playbook, operational efficiency, gosh, I can't remember the other one. But then we listed out what was necessary at each level. And it became a public document for all the sales reps on the floor so they can very well see like what we expected from them at the different levels. And people loved it. I mean, on the sales team, like they were like, okay, well, I want to be an enterprise. And like, if I'm getting called out for cleaning up my Salesforce, every week, that's a signal that like I need to focus on operational efficiency, right? So it was a very detailed doc, and I'm sure it still lives there somewhere.
Yeah, I would say it's the track record of those as well. We have a similar concept at Mongo, BDR to CRO, kind of an outline of that journey and the skill development, but it's the proof points that I think sometimes it's like, oh, you did it once, all right, great. But it's like the ability to do it over and over again is what will probably give you the signal that they have that success. But we also would give like stretch accounts to, on the edge of, can you do it in a little bit bigger, more complicated situation? If you've proven yourself twice in your current segment, let's give you a stretch test on that.
Yeah, I just add, you asked for a couple of examples, one being the complexity of the types of deals that they're doing, and complexity meaning either the multi-threading and the different types of buyers that they have to engage or deep procurement processes that you don't always see in commercial, but if you see some folks excelling there. And then for me, I'm always looking at internal selling skills. So did you bring an executive in to create alignment with the EB? Or how are you working with our legal team? Did you just throw the customer paper at our legal team and say, we have to sign this because they said, right? Versus are you being creative about pushing back and saying, hey, scary big enterprise prospect, I hear you. And also, your paper wasn't designed for SaaS, so this is why it makes sense. And so just seeing some of the skill building around being an adult and learning how to work with other adults.
Critical thought.
Critical thought.
I mean, so I joined Slack in end of 2017, and I feel like it was and I joined to build and lead out their large enterprise team. And it's really interesting because we're starting to see like, and this is maybe not SMB to enterprise, more like enterprise to large enterprise, but probably similar parallels. We're starting to see customers like started off as a product design engineering tool. And then it just started proliferating into marketing and sales and finance and operations. And we're starting to see the use cases come in and our champions getting louder about how this is no longer just, product talking to product and engineering talking to, product. This is a much bigger thing. And so we started really building out the use cases. And the buyer remained the same in large enterprise as it was in mid-market, SMB, CIO, director of IT, whatever the top level person was. But it was the use cases that we really built off of. And we were able to get the Amazons, the Apples, the IBMs, the Nikes, 60,000 plus employees, really building off like, we never did the productivity ROIs. Like my team was not allowed to share those slides. I know marketing spent a lot of time on those, but like they were just so like fluffy. And so it was really about like building Nike's ROI, of bringing a shoe to market faster, because the celebrity, or not celebrity, the athlete that the shoe represented could be in a negative PR scandal, and the time that it takes for the shoe to like be designed to come to market. And so they wanted to pull that faster, and like really showing how Slack enabled that. And so it's just really like getting specific about use cases, and that's what helped us go up market.
Yeah, I agree. It's when you have that whole story. I think that was true at Box, Slack, Mongo. It's like you have a strong enough story and the product's there that you can have a story for how this solution is going to apply to everyone in your company or all of your developers. Then it's I think that's sort of that tipping point when you have a real narrative and proof points to go do that top-down sanctioned, we're buying this for everybody sale.
Internally for me, in the last couple of companies I've been there for this transition, it's when you start to feel like enterprise is being taken seriously by the executive team and cross-functionally, because sometimes, like I said, I started when I was at Fivetran, I started when we didn't have an enterprise business, and I felt like I was the evangelist, and that was my thing, and I'm carrying the torch for enterprise, which is fine, except for the rest of the company continued operating as a commercial business. And so that moment when, I mean, I've had people walk out of exec offsites being like, oh, we're serious this time, you know, and that means cross-functional investment. So common language, like I've talked about several times, focus, willingness to invest more in internal infrastructure like a real legal team and a deal desk team that can help you, you know, like, so when the company shows you that they're willing to make the investment in the human and systems infrastructure required to do a very complex deal, to me, has been the moment where I'm like, oh, this is happening.
Ladies, you have a wealth of experience and a wealth of knowledge. Thank you for sharing with us. Can we give it up for the 20Sales team?